Just to get started, my name is Miguel Valentin. I'm the Executive Director of Momentum and Value for People of Color. And today I just want to talk a little bit about the power of influence, strategies for persuasion and inspiration. First, I want to kind of start by taking a look at some of the influential leaders that we have in the world today. Really good example of that is the Time Magazine Influential People. They put out influential people all the time, or person of the year, and oftentimes it's controversial. Even at one point, Hitler was influential leader of the year. And really, we have a mixed bag. We have good influential leaders, we have bad influential leaders, and anyone in between. And why is that? Why do we have such a mixed bag? It's because influence is not good or bad, but it is an ability, it's a power, it's an attribute. Your ability to influence, what that really means is your effectiveness to make change. It's a tool that you use in your leadership style that allows you to make change in any situation, conversation, a project that you're doing in school, an organization that you step into for the first time. Your ability to influence is your ability to make change in that situation. And all of these people have changed our lives, and for better or for worse, one way or another. They've wielded the power of influence for whatever they saw fit. And we have some people, some examples that we know of that use influence in the wrong ways. They focus on power, they focus on control and position. And so they use that influence in that direction. When we look at our own personal lives, we can even see people who have that kind of influence. When they step into a room, you have your professors, your teachers, maybe a supervisor, someone you work with. When they step into the room, you feel that anxiety, that stress that they bring to the situation or to the organization. They're influencing the way that you think, the way that you speak. They influence you in different ways. So when we look at influencers in the world, influencers in our personal lives, we know that we need more good influential leaders. We need to tip that scale. We need to bring in more good influential leaders. And to be honest, I do believe that my generation and your generation, millennials and Gen Zs, are in a really good position or opportunity to be those good influential leaders. We grew up in a world of chaos. A lot of what's happening, the economic downturn, 9/11, the pandemic, the wars, everything that we've been through, climate change, we're in a position to bring about a lot of good change. When I talk to a lot of older people who are in the workforce, there's a lot of questions about what kind of leaders millennials and Gen Zs will be. That a lot of them are lazy or entitled. These are tropes that we hear a lot of the times. And I don't really see that when I work with Gen Z, when I work with my colleagues with millennials. I think that we can be that generation that uses influence in a really good way to make positive change. Because without it, then what else do we have? So we need to become the better influential leaders. We need to be that generation to bring about positive change. We need to be those change makers. And so by focusing on being better influential leaders, we can create a world where trust, cooperation, and progress are the norm. And I really do believe that. So now the question is how? So I talked about why we need good influential leaders, but this is about how to implement and use influence in your daily life, right? I just wanted to make sure that we're using it for the right reasons before we get into some of the techniques and things that you can use to become a better influential leader. So moving forward, I'll talk to you about how we can be good influential leaders. And I think at the crux of this, if a bad influential leader is about focusing on power, wealth, position, control, then I think a good influential leader is a leader who focuses on trust, on establishing trust and maintaining trust. When that is your goal and your focus, that'll be your compass. As you grow in leadership, as you move into different positions, as you become part of bigger and bigger teams and organizations, if you focus on establishing and maintaining trust, you will become a good influential leader in everything that you do. People will follow you. Without trust, people will not want to follow you. So this is going to be a crucial part of influence. Influence is a byproduct of trust. Let me give you an example of that. When I was fresh out of college and I was looking for a job, as many people are, One of my first gigs was as a youth director. So it was one of the first nonprofits that I had worked for full time. And when I was interviewed for the position, I was interviewed by this guy named Len, and he was a legend in the field, had been a youth director for decades. He was closer to retirement. He was an author of several books, and he was in my interview, and I luckily got the job. But when I did, he sat me down and he's like, "Can I give you some advice?" And I was like, "Yes, of course." He said, "I've seen this too many times where a new youth leader or leader comes in and they want to assert dominance, or they want to prove themselves, or they want to have control over the situation or their group. So the first things they do is they change the name. They change the name of the youth group. They change the paint on the walls, and they do everything themselves. And they only use their volunteers to maybe set up chairs here and there, but then they want to be the star of the show and show that they are good leaders." He's like, "Don't do that. Do me a favor, don't do that. Instead, I want you to focus on establishing trust. I want you to focus on building trust with your team, with the people that are going to be volunteering under you." And so I took his advice seriously. I had 10 people who were volunteering as staff. A lot of them were older than I was. Again, I was fresh out of college. Some of them had more experience than I did. So I was stepping into a situation where I wanted to prove myself, but I wanted to take his advice. So I ended up meeting with every single volunteer one-on-one for 1 hour. And I asked them a bunch of questions, trying to get to know them and establish trust. And so I asked them, "What are some of your goals? What do you want to get out of volunteering? What has it been like? What do you want it to be like?" And just asking a lot of open-ended questions. And at first they felt that was weird. They didn't know how to respond. A lot of them said, "Why are you asking me about what I want to get out of this? I'm trying to volunteer. This is me giving back." I said, "That's great. That's fine. And I love that. And thank you for that. But that doesn't mean that you don't get anything out of this experience, or we can't focus on some of the things that you might want to develop over your time with us." And that slowly started building that relationship. And to maintain that, I had regular meetings with them just to check up on them on some of their goals and what they wanted to accomplish. And by the end of it, instead of having one youth director and 10 volunteers, it felt more like there was 10 youth directors. All of them were engaged in leading activities and games, doing fundraising, planning retreats, running programs, the after-school programs in different capacities. And we just focused on a lot of things that they wanted to do. And they trusted that any task that I had asked them to do, whether big or small, whether they failed it or not, I would have their back. That if they were to fail, I would take the heat. And we just kept building on that trust with one another. And they were able to do amazing things. They trusted me to the point where I could influence the group, influence the team in the direction that we needed to go in. And then we started impacting lives and the youth that we served on a daily basis. And so it ended up being a great little piece of advice. Focus on trust, focus on your team, not just the goal, not just asserting dominance or control. But you want to be a good influential leader, focus on trust. So that's what the next portion of this presentation is going to be about. It's going to be about focusing on trust. I'm going to give you some practical techniques on how to do that. So becoming a good influential leader, 3 techniques for establishing trust. They are as follows: active listening, finding common ground, and lastly, positivity. If you implement these 3 things, you're going to find it easier to establish trust. When people trust you, you can make change. You can influence the way that they think. You can influence the way that they act in a certain situation or how well they perform a specific task. So your influence is based on trust. And you can build trust by doing these 3 things. There's a bunch of other things you can do to build trust, but to keep this presentation concise, this is a great place to start. And you can start practicing a lot of these things right away in your personal lives. So the first thing, active listening. Here's a quote by Stephen, author of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I highly recommend this book. This is a fantastic start for leadership. And the quote is, "Most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply." And I don't know if you feel the same way, but I've encountered so many people where I start talking and their eyes kind of glaze over and I can tell they're not really paying attention. And the minute I stop talking, they start with something that has nothing to do with what I just said. It happens all the time. People sometimes just listen for a gap for them to start speaking and start responding. To be an influential leader, to build that trust, we need to slow down, take a step back, actively listen. Active listening are techniques that you can do that show the other person that you are listening. These are techniques used by counselors, by therapists. You'll notice that when they're listening to you, they'll use some of these techniques. One is seek to understand. When you ask questions, don't just think, how do I get them to think like I think or get them to a certain conclusion? It's ask questions that are open-ended. Seek to understand their perspectives. What are some of your goals? What are some of the skills that you want to develop from the last example? Ask open-ended questions to understand their motives and the direction that they want to go in. And this one's very simple, easy to start implementing. It's called echoing. Someone tells you something, it's so easy to show that you heard them by just saying back to them what you heard. You can rephrase it if you like, or just saying exactly what they said. Just affirms them, I heard you, I understand, I'm taking what you're saying into consideration. An example of this is if you're talking to someone, maybe you're trying to sell them on something or what have you, they'll tell you, I need some time to think about this. You can repeat back to them, I understand you need some time to think about this, or rephrase it. Well, I know this is a lot to process. You might want to take a night to sleep on it. That's fine. That person will then feel safe, heard, understood. They don't feel pressured in any way. You're reaffirming what they're saying, and then you can take the conversation in a different direction or in another way. So this is a great way to show people that you are listening to what they're saying. You're building that trust. They are a part of your team and what you're trying to accomplish. So active listening will build that trust and allow you to influence your team in any situation. The next one is finding common ground. And first is inclusive language. This is a small thing that you can start keeping track of when you talk to people, a crowd, an audience, or just a single person, replacing the I and you language with we. It's very easy, it's very simple. But say you have a group project. Instead of saying, I need to get an A in this class, so you all need to do the work that you need to do. You need to do the research, you need to present so that I can get a good grade. And as much as you may want to say that, it's much better if you say, we need to get a good grade in this class. We need to just do the work and do the research and present so that we can get what we need. By just switching the words I and you into we, you're creating that sense of a team, that we're going to either fail together or we're going to succeed together. That finding common ground builds trust and connection that allows you to move forward together. So using inclusive language, even when you pay attention to this talk that I'm giving now, when I say, I don't say, ways that you can be a good influential leader. It's ways that we can become good influential leaders. It kind of lessens the tension a little bit. It brings us all together, that we're all on the same level. We all have the same goal. So language is important. Using inclusive language helps establish trust. Small talk. I am not good at small talk. I am honestly not the worst, but I'm pretty bad at small talk. Sometimes it may feel a little bit forced or fake, or let's just cut to the chase, or like, let's just get into the meat and bones of things. But small talk is a great tool to find common ground in the little things. That's all it is. You're just finding common ground in little things. When we talk about how the weather is nice, we all like good weather. So it's a great way for us to connect. In the workplace, a lot of people say happy Friday. It's just a common thing that we all love Fridays. So just bringing it up breaks the tension, smooth things over, brings people together. And that's kind of what you want. People lay down their guard and to be able to feel secure and at home. It will allow you to influence certain situations. Now, I used to work for a communication service. I won't say which one. There's some examples there of what I'm talking about. And I was a salesperson for one of these companies. And my job was to go door to door and just walk in uninvited and say, hey, this is who I am. This is what I'm selling, and influence the way that they spend their money. I had to convince them to buy the product that I had. And it was hard. 9 times out of 10, they did not want to speak to me. The minute I walked through the door, they knew what I was about. And I needed to use quick things. They taught us in the communication service agency that use small talk, break the ice, make them feel comfortable, because then you can influence their purchase decisions. So even the small things of talking about the weather or walking into a grocery store like place and say, oh man, I used to like buy those candies when I was a kid, ask my mom for 50 cents. Finding these small points of connection that have nothing to do with my actual goal, making that small talk loosened people up and allowed me to actually have the conversation that I needed to have. So small talk, as hard as it can be for some of us, for whatever reason, is a great skill to push ourselves to get better at. Just walk into conversations that feel uncomfortable, don't know where it's going to go, and then just try to make small connections and then see how people's guards go down. And then you can actually have meaningful conversations afterwards. So finding common ground is a great way to bring people together. Feel like you're a part of a team, establish that trust, and then you can then influence people in a positive direction. So we had active listening, finding common ground, and then lastly, positivity. Now, positivity at the face of it might sound a little frou-frou or like just be happy, but positivity, you can tell the difference when you have an employer, a boss who is very negative versus someone, a manager, employer, a boss who is very positive. There is one that you will do anything for, and there is one that you do not want to see on a daily basis. It's completely evident. The way that you approach a problem or a team or a situation will dictate, if the person is going to follow you or not. So positivity can be very important. Body language, when you're talking about positivity, when you speak, do you seem excited about what you're talking about? Do you use your hands? Do you make eye contact? Do you smile? A lot of what you're saying has nothing to do with the words that are coming out of your mouth. When people feel that energy, they'll follow you. They'll see that positivity. A good example of this, my fiance, she's considered a social media influencer on Instagram. She has a following and it's under Be Fat, Be Happy, right? And her and a lot of her other friends that do influencing with food and restaurants and things, you'll notice that there's always this moment where they take the first bite of whatever they're trying or eating. And you could just see it on their face. Like, they're just like, this is so good. And it's convincing where it's like, oh man, like that actually seems pretty good. I kind of actually want to try that. But it's very different if they tried it and was just like, it's good. That doesn't convince me at all. Body language is everything when it comes to influencing. And so that's something to keep in mind when you talk to someone or a group or an audience. That body language can bring out a lot in what you're trying to say. Humor, very underrated. If you're funny, if you're naturally funny, this helps people bring down their guard. When they laugh, they trust. If they're open to make that laughter, then they're open to follow you. So implementing humor and the things that you say, don't be afraid to kind of weave that into the way that you work and how you interact with people. And then lastly, but most importantly, barriers versus opportunities. Barriers versus opportunities. This is the moment where good leadership becomes great leadership. When it talks about influence, when you take barriers and instead of presenting a bunch of barriers, you start presenting opportunities. This is going to change everything. So an example of what that looks like, I was a librarian, which was a really fun career working for that kind of nonprofit. And it's an older institution with older people that are really stuck in their ways, and it's hard to change. It's hard to influence that organization. So when I first came in, I could have said, between the ages of 17 and 30, nobody uses the library. Literacy has gone down. I can mention all of these problems and say, we're not doing XYZ right, and then just be frustrated about the entire system. Instead of talking about all of these barriers, I can start presenting them as opportunities. And that's what I tried to do. This is an opportunity for the library to rebrand themselves, to be different than all the other libraries, to be a central hub for the community. And we can have English as a second language classes. We can create information together. We can have programs where we talk about technology and have theater nights and workshops and all these things. This is a great opportunity for the library to pivot in a meaningful way. Now people are excited. Now people want to initiate fun new projects. They're not bogged down by barriers or what the library used to be, but what we can be. Positivity is a great way to bring people together, to influence an organization. As rigid as a library can be, you can make a quiet library, a loud library, if you just start implementing opportunities, showing opportunities instead of focusing on the barriers. So in summary, the world needs good, influential leaders. We need more of them. I believe that we can become that generation of good, influential leaders. I really do. And we become good, influential leaders when we focus on trust. Instead of focusing on position, power, authority, proving ourselves, we focus on establishing trust and maintaining that trust. We establish trust through active listening, finding common ground, and positivity. I believe that if you start doing these things in your relationships, in your daily lives, you'll see that people will be attracted to you and your style of leadership. People will want to follow you and work with you. So let's go do that. Let's become good, influential leaders. Let's start practicing these things.